Okay.
Alrighty, so welcome to another episode of the SCS podcast. I'm VJ. We're here with Siva and Stuart, and our special guest of today is Adam Matteo. He's a PE with Vdot, and he's the assistant state structure and bridge engineer for bridge maintenance and bridge management. Adam is responsible for over 19,000 of Virginia's highway bridges and large culverts. Um, so, Adam, tell us a little bit about how you got started in the industry and what your background is.
Okay, I'll go back to the way back. In 1984, we were in the middle of a recession. I took, work being scarce at the time, I took any engineering job I could find, which landed me in Mare Island, or Vallejo, California, working at Mare Island Shipyard. Started my career doing structural analysis of pressure hulls on submarines. Very interesting work.
Wow. What made you get into working with submarines?
It was the available job, and
Yeah.
it was
Someone who's
what
paying.
there wasn't much out there at the time. We were just coming out of, it was starting to be it was a kind of a slow time. The position paid $8.50 an hour, and, times being what they were, I took it,
Yeah.
but it was very interesting work. Learned how to I learned all about welding and weld testing and
Yeah.
structural analysis. So it was really good, and I think that was a good start. And I realized after a couple of years that was a very very particular silo of structural engineering. And I needed to expand and get into more civil work and other things like that. So I moved on to a different branch of the Navy and designed bridges and buildings for the Navy in California, and then came back to Virginia, worked for Henrico County for a very short while, went back to graduate school, and then got into consulting. About half of my career has been in the consulting industry, half in government. And on the government side, I started with the federal government for the first 5 years, short time with the county. And then for the last 13 years, I've been with the state of Virginia. And so about half and half. And I will
Okay.
say, I gotta plug VDOT a little bit, probably guilty of that, and more guilty than anybody. But I really, of all the government agencies that I've seen, VDOT is really the best, and they prosecute work. We have a lot of problems, like any large organization does. And if you look at any private organization, probably heard the term corpocracy. It happens as a function of large institutions. VDOT has some of that. But I think when you look at the end of the day, what we do with what's available, I'm very impressed with the technical capacity and the capability and what we can get done. So
Yeah, yeah. We have a lot of great things to say about BDOT as well. We've done a lot of work with them. Um, so one of the things that we wanted to discuss with you is we saw that you went to MIT, and there's the times have changed drastically from the time when you guys started your guys' career and getting involved. How is it different with working with the newer graduates versus the graduates of your time?
I feel badly for the newer graduates. I do, because they're not given an opportunity to have the breadth of experience that I was given. And I, I don't know if your question is quite as directed toward the training that they receive in college or the experience that they get in their first few years out of college. I feel for them in both regards. I will tell you, I'll speak bluntly. I don't think that current undergraduate curricula are appropriately tailored to meet today's needs. I really don't. I don't think that people are well enough schooled in fundamental mechanics of engineering. I don't think they're well enough schooled in the practical elements. They abandoned surveying years ago.
Mm,
It's just a fundamental part. I guess they figure, hey, you'll pick it up. Okay, these are smart folks, but it's not that easy. It's not that direct. So many of the practical elements are really hard for younger people to get. And so the times change and expectations change. But I do feel for that. So one of the things that we do when we bring new people on is we try to get them practical hands-on experience. Something a colleague of mine, I'm really fond of this phrase, and I use it whenever I can, overuse it, but a civil engineer should never get too far from the dirt.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
chew on that for a minute. What that means is what we do and why our profession is so rewarding and why I love it. And you're probably gonna have to drag me out feet first because I really enjoy my work.
Yeah.
Is that we deliver something that you can go out and touch and
right.
see and
Yeah.
feel. And so that's the product. That's really, we do these calculations. We're so proud of them. We're like, "Ah, look at these calcs we did. I'm so smart." And it's fun. It's a challenge. But at the end of the day, we have something that's physical that matters to people's lives. So we can go out and see that. So the young engineer, pivoting back to your question, doesn't often get to understand that. So either
Right.
they get put in this silo or that silo, and then they find their way out, which is tough because we don't have enough people going into civil structural engineering as it is. I'm sure you have the same problem.
Yeah,
Very hard to find enough people.
Yeah.
So that part is really, I think, a challenge for them to understand the product and what we do. So we
Right.
try to immerse them or give them opportunities to cross train
Right.
because you don't, another, maybe this is cliche, you don't want to be the guy or gal with you want 30 years experience, not 1 year of experience 30 times, right? You want
Right.
to keep
Right.
keep that, you got to mix it up and learn
right,
about
right.
this because what you learned here on what I learned watching people do maintenance work in the field is as informative to me as anything I've done in my career. What I learned at the shipyard, those things, it's all part of how you approach a new problem. And can you take a new problem, synthesize a solution, and make it a good solution? So all those things are really tough.
Yeah.
And I'll maybe add another thing. I don't think they're well versed enough in report writing and just writing in general. I think
Mm.
that's another weakness and I'll put that on our colleges. I don't think that they emphasize it enough.
Yeah.
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 In this day of texting and TikTok, if you can do,
Yeah.
all that, the acronyms and people talk in acronyms in the text and TikTok,
Yeah.
it's difficult to sit down and write a report. I get it. And so, how does VDOT get people? I mean, you got 19,000 bridges
Right.
that you have to decide which one you're going to work on, what are you going to maintain, what are you going to replace. How do you do that? Uh,
It's a challenge, but everybody's facing that challenge. I think that the thing that we offer, that we try to emphasize to potential hires, is that we offer things that can't be provided in the private sector.
yeah.
We offer, I think, good benefits for sure. That's part of it. And I say I love it, but if they stopped paying me tomorrow, I
Yeah.
probably wouldn't show up.
Right.
So it is a
Yeah.
job,
Yeah.
and so we got to be real about that. We don't get to pay nearly as much as private industry. But the main thing is you get to do really interesting stuff.
All right.
So,
Yeah.
right. So there's a good back. And that's what I think that's why we all go into it. Because you could take a room of civil structural engineers or any kind of engineer. Any one of those people could have done a million other things because you don't get through that if you're not pretty darn smart, right? So these are capable people, and they can do a lot of things, but they go into this because I think they want to make a difference. I'll go back to I do a lot of talks, and sometimes when I talk about quality of work, and we get into that a lot, I'll ask the crowd, how many of you have ever taken a family member or friend by a job that you've been worked on? It's unanimous. There's never a hand that doesn't go up
Yeah.
because we're all proud of that work.
Right.
So we try to emphasize that in our recruiting, that you're going to make a difference. And it's true. When I was a consultant, we would do really interesting jobs, 5, 10, 15 a year, 20, I don't know. Uh, but we're touching many, many bridges. We're having a very massive influence on the future of Virginia's bridges and maybe the nation's bridges. So we try to emphasize that. The work is very interesting.
Yeah.
We offer a good lifestyle of the work home mix.
Balance. Yeah.
We don't want people to lean into that too much because we look, we're professionals, so sometimes you gotta work those extra hours. So we don't wanna,
Right.
like, lower those expectations too much. But we have, I think, uh, a little more flexibility that we can offer that. So
Right.
Mm,
those are the things we have to do to compensate for the less fancy digs. We don't have the fancy offices, and we don't get to pay a lot. So there's some balance.
Right. Right.
gotcha. So
And yeah, go
when
ahead.
the students they graduate and there's some new challenges that they face with their curriculum and the way that it applies to the real world applications of what they're going to be doing in their career, um, it's interesting because there's a lot of, like you're saying, this mismatch of what they're actually taught versus what's necessary in the industry. What's one of those things that stands out to you when you see an applicant and you say, "This is what I really like to see"?
Well, are you talking about a new grad now?
Yeah, like a new
Um,
graduate coming into the industry and they're
mhm,
looking for their first job. What is
yeah.
it that shows you that they are a cut above the rest, that they're really interested in the work that you guys do and that matters to them? So, what do you look for in their resumes and how they've spent their time in school?
Mhm.
Is there anything that stands out that you immediately recognize as, oh, this is definitely an indicator that this person's going to do some good stuff?
Well, there's several parts of that hiring process. You mentioned resumes. I'll start with that to answer your question. In a resume, I'm looking for directed coursework that applies to the work we're doing. And unfortunately, with modern curricula, there's so much diffusion. So you rarely get the person who is concentrated in that field unless they go get a master's. And we have a couple of doctorates in my group and have had others in the past. And you'll find that they've had enough usually. I have a little different opinion than many other civil engineers. A lot of people are down on PhDs. I'm quite the opposite. I think that to get a PhD, you've established that you can really learn things and you understand you're well grounded. You can't get that far without it. Now, do we need to blend them in with a little colorful, little more field experience and other things?
Hands in
Yeah.
the dirt.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
to get back to the dirt for sure, but
Yeah.
this is a person who really understands the fundamentals, and if it's a lot harder to do that. So I'm in the resume, I'm looking for somebody, if it's a new grad,
Mhm.
somebody that kinda understands the mechanics and the basic principles of engineering, which is, and this is not politically correct at all, but I do care about where you went to school. It matters to me, and I mean, I know that you can get, if you apply yourself, you can get a good education anywhere. The books are the same. But there is something to be said for a better university. That matters to me.
Right.
Also, a master's degree matters to me. I know we're being told, don't worry about that, but I do worry about it. So that's my opinion. And
Yeah.
then that's the resume part. But there's other things too, just as important maybe, or the cover letter and the resume. If you have, this is, you're putting your best foot forward, and you're writing 2-paragraph cover letter, don't come to me with the grammatical errors. And if
Right.
you're not proficient in English, that's okay. That's not a non-starter. But get somebody to review it who is. That's okay. That's
Right.
what you should do.
Right.
So I mean, it's not like, oh, that's not your first language. Of course, we live in a diverse world, and we welcome all that, and the people who I had so much admiration for. If you didn't grow up speaking English, somehow you can master it. That's a leg up. That's a point for you, but make sure that you care enough about the quality of your product to get a one-page letter right. And the other thing is in the interview. I put a lot of stock in interviews. I really like to
Yeah.
get a sense of people.
Right.
What are you cooperative? Or do you come in with an attitude? Are you the kind of person that is eager to learn and go solve problems and work with other people? And that's just something you have to judge, when you talk to people. The
Yeah.
human element, and yeah,
Absolutely.
how else can you evaluate? So,
Right.
yeah.
Absolutely. I agree with you. When we're talking, you get to know the person. On paper it all looks good, when you get to talk to the person, you get a feel for, is this the person who would be fitting into the group that he's going to be working with? He's going to work with people. So
Yeah, and I don't. This is not an accusation at anybody, but people can be kind of creative with their resumes, so and we see that all the time. They can maybe a little expansive in their presentation of what they actually did. That's
yeah,
okay.
yeah,
But you really can find out specifically about that in the discussion. So you get people with resumes that look great, and then you talk to them, you probe a little bit. Maybe it's a
yeah,
little overrepresentation. So that interview is a big deal for us.
yeah.
Gotcha.
I'm going to go into a little technical question for you.
Okay.
I know you are in the bridge management, and so you work and analyzing all these 19,000 bridges and their condition and trying to decide where you're going to focus, for the next 5 years or whatever. So how do you what's the process? How do you prioritize what you need to address in the next 5 years, what you can wait? How do you Can you explain that for somebody who's not a bridge, person, but they drive over the bridge all the time? They have no clue.
Absolutely. So this goes back to it's a great question because it gets to there's the theoretical and the mathematical, and we'll just call it the science.
Right,
And then there's the practical, and we go back to the dirt, and it's a bit of both.
right.
So over in this space, we have a really rich, well-defined data set. We get hands-on bridge inspections every 2 years with a lot of data, and it's
Mhm.
updated. So we have that data going back decades. So
Mm,
we mine that data and we look for trends. And that's interesting. That's where someone who really understands statistics and probability and modeling and deterioration curves and Markov chains, all
Markup
these
chains,
great
yeah.
things, Weibels, and okay, great. They know the math, they know the statistics, but it's still a needle in a haystack. So you need to have some judgment to say, okay, that's the math of the thing. You can take a huge crank and we're going to go through the hay, or you can do a kind of a combination where you say, based on my experience, my judgment, what I observe, I can I have a pretty good sense that needle is going to be in this part of the haystack. Then we apply the math to that. That's a kind of just a metaphor, but I think you see where I'm going. And so that's the modeling, and that's done over here. So we still need math and practicality in that. And then so the modeling I think is really valuable for directing large scale
Mm,
funding and initiatives, right? So
right,
we
right.
can take very specific models of every bridge, and we do this. We'll take every bridge in the inventory. We'll look at past deterioration. We'll look at past actions. We'll look at, and then we'll say, okay, it's deteriorating at this rate, and this is the condition state that we anticipate that it'll be at 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Based on that analysis of every bridge, we'll take a large picture away and say, okay, looks like what we really need to be doing is focusing on these things because we can do some sensitivity analysis, and that'll provide the overall direction. Where that very specific model is good at that output, but it's not good at saying, okay, the model said we're going to work on this bridge in 2029. We're going to do this. That's not. And then that's where really you need the feet on the ground. And that's where the districts who know their bridges, and the people, you got to go walk on a bridge before you really know.
Right.
The data can say, hey, looks like this ought to be done, but you got to go look at it. So we kind of use those things. The
Gotcha.
modeling is very good at general program direction, and I'm very proud of the work that we do on that. But at the end of the day, we have to really have a lot of room for human decision making and practical engineering judgment.
So, if I understand correctly, you're saying you use the model with the whole 19,000 to zero in on, hey, I want to look at these 3,000,
Yeah.
and then take the 3,000 and go to the district and say, we want to walk through these. to figure out which one you guys think, and well, let's walk through that.
Basically that, but rather than just take a population of bridges, what we'll say is this this analysis is pointing us to the most effective set of actions. So it'll be overall program guidance, or so we'll say, we have this many metal culverts, and they're just awful. And what we can do, it also, I should also say, there's kind of a corollary to that, which is it'll guide the research efforts. So we say, okay, the data mining, the management part, say, like, clearly it will display where your problems are. So it looks like we have, unfortunately, a lot of metal culverts, a lot of timber bridges. That's not what generally people think of when they think of a bridge, but so be it, right? The so we kind of fashion particular solutions to those problems and also do research. So we have what's the best flow line, or what's the best material. We also look at the concrete decks. That's a different population, and that overall modeling will say, hey, for this kind of bridge, the general treatment is this. The blend of funding should look like this. So it goes to kind of set up the basic rules for funding and the parameters that the districts operate under. And then they have a lot of flexibility, as they should, to go in and make those individual decisions, both in maintenance and in construction.
So when you do the modeling and you get those 3,000 bridges, and you know somewhat from your experience for 3,000 bridges that we have to work on, you would need certain amount of money. Then you make that budget requirement. And then once you
Yes,
get it,
yes.
then you assign it to each and every bridge specifically what needs to be done. And you do that.
I'm glad you, well, before I answer the particular question, I'd like to maybe riff a little bit on the
Yeah.
general question, which is we do a needs report every year.
Uh-huh.
And that whole bridge management exercise is really important for advocating for how much money you really need. So we put a lot of effort into that. And advocacy is one of the big things that we do. We have to, we feel the obligation to let executives know, hey, this is what our analysis shows that we need to maintain this level of service for this many years. And if they don't tell them, we're going to sit around and gripe about how not having enough money. That's really lazy.
Right,
"Oh, we
right.
just need more money." There was a lot of that was around 15 years ago. We've really tried to move that away to a data-driven approach so that we can come in and say, hey, this is the best way to go. We need this money. And you can't, you got to really be credible in that. You got to establish that, yes, you have a partisan approach, but you got to play it straight. You can't spin it. So, oh, we need this much, because then you lose credibility, and then
Right.
you're doing a disservice and you're being dishonest. So we go back to the applied scientists approach on that part, and I think we've been very successful. I think we've really established credibility, because what we say has been, our predictions have been pretty good. So
Yeah.
far, so
Right,
we're
right.
better than the weatherman. So that's good. But you asked specifically, how do we determine that money? So now, okay, so just take the state of good repair. We now have a pot of money and certain legislatively enacted laws that we have to follow for that. Then the CTB will establish policy. We'll inform the CTB policy too. And now there's a pot of money, and how do we pick each bridge? We have what you could call it a multi-objective prioritization formula. What's the other another function? There's another term for it. But we have these prioritization formulas, and I think they're good. They take into consideration all the things about a bridge: condition, cost effectiveness of life cycle, cost effectiveness of proposed treatments,
Mm-mm.
um, functionality. Is the bridge wide enough? Does it serve its function? Is it posted? Does it have property clearance, or does it get overtopped by a river? So there's functionality. Then there's the importance, right? A bridge that takes 5 cars a day, and it's just not as important as a bridge that 20,000 of our fellow citizens got to take every day. Bigger impact. Doesn't mean that the bridge that helps 5 people isn't important to those 5 people, but we have to kind of optimize the overall good.
Right.
The other thing is, are there alternative routes? So we've established these variables in this multi-objective formula for the selection of projects. But again, like with any formula, you gotta have room for judgment. So we have some escape clauses, some methodologies, some kind of open methods of bypassing the formula, and it's all done kind of very publicly, and there's a process for it. So, hey, I don't like what the formula is telling me. Okay, let's talk about that, and there's a waiver process, and we can use that judgment and override the thing. So you don't want to like worship that formula, but it's a good guide.
Right.
So it's
Right.
just keeping in mind the ratio of the public benefit to the public resources that we're using. So that's wonderful that you are able to manage the 19,000 bridges in Virginia that you do, and do that in a way that keeps all of the public resources used correctly without overusing, and with being honest with our public resources and the people that provide them to us. So I think that's really important.
Yeah,
Um,
and yeah, VDOT's a large organization, and I also have great respect for how it's run. And one challenge I'm curious to hear your thoughts on is you have a number of different districts with different exposures and their own unique
Yeah.
problems.
Right. Right.
I guess do they act largely independently? How do you coordinate all those different regional? Because there's definitely, like you said, there's a lot of benefit to having local people who know the bridges and what it needs, but you also have to maintain that high level direction to your program.
Well, we aspire to do that with tact and patience and communication and data. So what we have is in our 9 districts this really uh, highly qualified set of district bridge engineers. I mean, these are very talented people with talented teams.
Right.
So, like anybody in the world, like me, like everybody probably you met this morning or tomorrow, nobody likes to be told what to do. So here we are as central office, and we have a role and a function. And these districts, they're the owners of the bridges, right? So they get it from cradle to grave. They are in charge of that bridge. They run the design of it, the procurement, the maintenance, the inspection. So we really have to defer to that local knowledge. So you gotta really collaborate. Sometimes we meet that goal, sometimes we don't. So when we don't, there's friction. But there's also the, one of the roles of the central office is to make sure that the overall need of the state is met, and that's another thing. So there's a lot of communication that's necessary to reach that goal. Sometimes we meet that standard, and sometimes we don't. But I think that people are always very open to good, rational arguments, and sometimes we all start a discussion with an opinion. It's hard to move people
Yeah,
off of
where we
that.
think we're going.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things in district, I'll make up an imaginary district 15, uh, their natural instinct is to look out for the interests of District 15, right? They're like, hey, so they may not care so much if there's a screaming need over in 16. However, I think that people are noble enough. This is my observation to say, look, I understand. Okay, I hear she really needs this, and we're going to go. We're not going to cry about it. We're going to go. So if we can look out for the overall well-being of the inventory, because that's really those are if you think about who's your customer are the not even the drivers, I don't think, but the bridges, right? Because the bridges serve the drivers. So who are you doing this for? What are you doing this for? You're doing it for the well-being of that asset group. So you always try to think, what's the best thing for that? So that's where we come at the problem. But it's not easy. It's
Yeah.
not easy because it never will be. I mean, why? How could if you got an easy solution? I'm all ears. I'm glad to hear it. But you try to really come at it with mutual respect. And if central office comes in with a heavy hand, that's not
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. I think that's really good that you have to work with the different folks and you have the data. So the data is a guide
Right.
and it guides you so that you're not too far off because that's how the asset is, maintained. That's how the projections are made and that the other districts understand.
Right.
So I guess educating them on that is helpful in terms of addressing the overall problem.
Yeah, yes, I would, and this is again, I know exactly what you meant, but just not to parse words, I wouldn't use the word educating them. It's really
Mm-mm.
more information sharing because the education
Information
is two
sharing.
ways.
Right.
Yeah.
They tell you what they're seeing, and
Right.
that's that practical part that you've got to have.
The
Hey,
dirt,
your data may make you think this, but let me tell you what I'm really worried about.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
so that's where we need to have more
So the
discussions.
meshing of that.
Yeah, we need. You can never have enough collaboration. We have an annual leadership meeting. We have regular. We have regular. I'm just talking about everybody in the whole Structure and Bridge Division writ large, central office
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the districts. We have an annual meeting, multiple days. We have research advisory committee meetings where pretty much everybody shows up and we talk about the directed practical research that we do. About to have two next week, concrete and bridge research advisory committees. That's really good collaboration. We have regular conference calls, and then we have other meetings, routine, regular interactions, like weekly for some districts, every 2 weeks for some. So you just can't talk enough
Yeah.
because it's you have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the service life expectancy for VDOT? Like for example, we used to design for 50 years. Now we are designing for 75. Are you okay with 75 and replace them or
No.
what your thought process?
No, no. Just to give away something from my presentation for tomorrow. The baseline context for this, Virginia funds its bridges very well. We have about going into bridges statewide, hard, it varies by year, but we have about $750 million every year going into our bridges.
Hmm.
That's good. We're sustaining our bridges, but at the rate that we replace bridges, we do about 120 a year.
Mm-mm.
19,000, that's all the bridges, that's 21,000. That includes localities because we have more responsibility for localities now than we used to. So call it 21,000. That's 190 years between replacements.
Yeah.
So we can't, 75 years doesn't cut the mustard.
Right.
So when somebody talks to me about, hey, can we use epoxy bar or black bar or something else, I get really spun up because we can't leave a mess. We have to be jointless. We have to have low permeability concrete. We have to have corrosion resistant materials. Everything we do when we go out to design a bridge has to be for that longevity. So I think, and we've had arguments about this, I really think we can get 150 years or more service life
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
bridges that we build today.
Right.
And I don't say that a lot because people, they just have an emotional reaction to that. But based on the math, and now let's go back to this is where these studies really matter, the bridge management part. So a bridge that used to, if you ask FHWA, how much does it cost to replace a bridge? They'll go look at all the specific unit costs on that bridge itself, what they pay the contractor, and they'll say it's $500 a square foot. However, when you
Yeah.
replace a bridge, it starts this far beyond the bridge and ends that far beyond the bridge.
Approach
And
to
includes
approach.
traffic control and right of way. And by the time you put all that together, it's about $2,000 or more per square
Oh,
foot to
really?
replace a
Wow.
bridge,
That's that different.
2,500, depending on the complexity.
Right.
And so that's what we pay for it.
Right. Right.
So now, by contrast, when we can do a preservation action, even up to superstructure replacement, that's going to tap out up to between $100 a square foot and $700 a square foot. So you can see immediately, as long as that rehabilitation intervention lasts 30, 40 years, you use right techniques, materials, it's always gonna give you a better life cycle. And then, but then going back to, okay, call it $2,000 per square foot for a bridge replacement. Now we say, well, you're going to use corrosion resistant reinforcement. And some smart guy says, you're tripling the price of what are you doing? Well, okay, so my $1 bar, what it is today, it varies, it's a commodity, is $3. Okay, so you've tripled the price of the bar, material cost. Okay, that's just the bar. Now you got to place the bar. Okay, that's half that cost. Now, instead of tripling, it's up by 1.5. And the bar is just part of a deck,
Big,
right?
big structure.
And
all
so
the
the
concrete, all
incremental cost to the deck is maybe 50%. So you've increased it, not even that, call it 40%. But the deck is maybe 20% of the cost of the bridge. So you start doing the math.
Yeah.
And you look at the incremental cost of taking that bridge from, I don't know, pick a year, 75 years to maybe 150 or who knows. It's about a 1% cost.
Right,
So it's
right.
like you don't even need to do the analysis. You just do you do that once or twice. You kind of understand. It's clear. And the same with low permeability concrete, which I think we save money on, right? You put pozzolans in your concrete,
Right.
and it's actually cheaper sometimes because you get so these are things we don't need to keep reinventing these wheels. We put it in our rules. We say go do that, and then we can focus our attention on the more complicated decisions. That
Right.
sort of
Wow, that's incredible. And so it gives me an idea of how you've been able to manage so many different structures over the course of your career, and the responsibility, as you're saying, is just only increasing as new structures are developed, and that's awesome. So I know, unfortunately, we didn't quite get to all of our questions. We want to make sure that you have enough time to get to where you got to be. So we really do appreciate you spending some time with us
It was
today,
my
Adam.
pleasure. Yeah, like I said, I love this stuff, so
Yeah.
I'm glad to do it. So,
Adam, it's so fun to have you here. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. And we love this, and we're going to do more of it. We'll probably bring you back again because we didn't finish all the questions we
Yeah,
had.
we would definitely love to
We'll
continue.
let you go. We'll bring you back another
it'd
time.
be my pleasure. Yeah, well, I'm just jammed up against this conference here, and I've got commitments associated with that. But you'll be there. I look forward to
Yeah.
hearing your presentation as well.
I
So,
appreciate you taking time to do that, even in the middle of all that. So I'll see you there.
it's a lot of fun.